Okay, hello guys. So I posted the two videos for Sunday service, and I went to go about my day and try to get some reports out. And I kept getting that no, I had two directly channeled, so this is directly channeled via my guides. March has been an interesting month to watch your growth. The human realm has done well in advancing in their knowledge and their understanding of who they are. If each one begins to recognize how they're shifting from the old dimension and they're moving into a new way of being, they're beginning to recognize that there is a separateness from the old way. And while people are living next to each other, they're living in different dimensions, which is why people are not understanding each other. It's almost like you're not even speaking the same language anymore. As you're gradually moving into the new way of being, you're beginning to understand that the old paradigm, the old structure, the old way of being that was more based in the 3D ego energy, which is more dense, more thick, you're recognizing that you're moving away from that, and you're finding more energy within the physical structure of who you are as a human being. And you're beginning to understand that the old ways, the old constructs may not necessarily be comfortable for you anymore. You're going to begin to recognize that there is a separation in the old and the new. And what we want you to understand is that the people that are raising their frequency are beginning to understand that they are becoming more uncomfortable in the way of the old structure, the thick, dense energy, fear, control, anxiety, the old patterns that are holding you in hurt and pain. You're starting to recognize that when people that surround you that are in that form of energy, you're becoming more and more uncomfortable. And what you're finding is that the energy pattern, the frequency that resides within you at this specific time is causing separation. And you're finding that you're more comfortable in the energy of happiness and joy, of calmness, peace, and probably solitude. And what we want you to recognize is that this is the advancement of the human race turning into a new way of being. The spiritual and angelic realm is making itself more known to you. Becoming more embedded within the physical structure. We also want you to recognize that all humans have the connection with the angelic realm. They may just not be aware of it yet due to the subtleties that this energy holds. But what we also want you to recognize is that you will begin to see that there is a separation in people, that there's a pulling away, and that there are two levels of consciousness that are being created. So what we want you to see is that the people that are finding that it is more comfortable to live in the more peaceful way, they're no longer going to be comfortable in the energy pattern of hate and anger. And what you're going to begin to see is that those that are staying in the hate and the anger are moving further and further away from you. The people that are finding themselves moving further and further in a way of a higher, lighter energy. We want you to understand that this is the process of the energy separating and pulling apart. And we want you to understand that this is necessary. We're creating a new realm. And what we want you to understand is that the individuals that are willing to accept this energy pattern and that choose to move forward and out of the human mind, out of the human construct that has been created in the belief systems that you must stay in the old patterns, you're going to begin to recognize that these patterns are dissipating and you're moving into a new realm. We also want you to understand that there's no fear that needs to be had. Many humans have the idea that change is scary, change is uncomfortable, just the thought of it. But what we want you to understand is that the more and more humans that begin to accept a way of living in peace and allowing their physical structures to shift with grace and ease, they'll begin to understand how simple this is. We just need you to be able to accept that this is the change that you're willing to make. If you continue to stay in the way of the tightness and the protectiveness of the old belief systems, then recognize that it is impossible for the human structure to shift in a new way of being. But we also want you to recognize that it's significantly important for the human to be able to sit with an open mind and allow themselves to simply be. We're moving into a time frequency that is more subtle, but is also more significant when the human will begin to start recognizing that they have less attachment to the past. They don't desire to know as much into the future, and they feel more comfortable being in the present moment. We want you to understand that this is a time paradigm that is occurring so that the time shift can become more prevalent. This doesn't make sense to many humans, but understand that we recognize what's happening. And the more that the individual stands in their independence and can be more present in the moment, you'll begin to recognize that life is much more joyful and blissful as you're staying in that moment, second to second, and not in substantial leaps into different directions that take you forward and backward. We want you to understand that the time continuum is continuing to shift so that people can begin to understand the different realities and the different dimensions of who they are and what they've been created to be. They're also going to begin to understand that the individual has the ability to shift, to choose, to change, to understand what timeline is most fluid for them. If someone is feeling grief, pain, sorrow, then that is the timeline that they will stay in until they choose to shift and change the perspective of who they are. If an individual chooses to stay in a consistent pattern that brings uncertainty, then recognize that that energy pattern in that timeline will continue to stay with them. Slow down. We want you to understand that the time continuum is becoming more and more known to humans. The human physical structure is becoming more in alignment with the frequencies that reside in each time plane. And the individual that becomes more sensitive to the energy structures in the physical body will begin to recognize what time plane is meant for them. When an individual is staying thick and dense in the physical structure, the energy that they will attract is that thick and dense energy. When an individual chooses to move forward into a different way of being, their energy shifts and the timeline will become more recognizable. that brings the daily outcomes that are needed for that specific timeline. Hold on, I need a break. The key now is breaking free from the need to control or understand the future. We advise sitting with an open mind, trusting the guidance, and allowing the soul's frequency to emerge. There is expect a major energetic shift occurring in April and May. The purpose of which is to help shift a collective movement away from dense, fear-based patterns of the old 3D paradigm and into a lighter, more aligned frequency of love, peace, and truth. This shift will assist individuals raising their frequency, during which you will feel increasingly uncomfortable in dense environments, leading to natural separation from toxic relationships, patterns, and roles. We need you to understand there is a substantial energy flux disrupting the earthly realm as sort of a sonic boom to break down old structures, particularly toward the end of April and beginning of May. Before that, the individual is encouraged to break free from the need to control. By shedding intellectual control and labeling, you will find that abundance, joy, and connection to the spirit world flow more easily.